He was coming up behind her, and she didn't hear a thing. She didn't even look back, but the girl froze in horror when she heard the crunch of twigs behind her. In the morning, they found her devoured body in the swamp. Sylvia finished her story and looked at her two friends. I'm not going to sleep now," Jenny replied, pulling her hood over her head and fixing her black hair. "Nice try, Sylvia," Felina said, and tossed some dry twigs into the fire. The night was clear but cold. The tent stood by the fire that the three friends had made together. They were only 15 years old. August had always been a special month for these girls. Last year, they had visited Disneyland in San Diego with Jenny's parents. This summer, the girlfriends decided to stay one night in the woods, telling each other scary stories. I guess now I should tell. Not just a story, but maybe a very real fact, Felina began. When I was a little girl, Sheriff Hector came to our house to talk to my father and my mother about something. All three of them went into the next room and closed the door. I, of course, began to eavesdrop, for adult topics were my favorite part. The sheriff said they couldn't find my father's brother, and his belongings were untouched. He hadn't even touched his dinner. All the police could find was the camera my uncle had taken with him. The pictures didn't show anything much except a lot of bushes, trees in the dark. He was using the flash to spot someone. Well, or just lighting his way. Uncle Jerry must have dropped his camera when he was running from someone. The mystery is, he was never found, not even a piece of his clothes. It all happened in these woods. I have dreams of my uncle running and looking around, pointing his camera to the side and taking a flash shot, running, and another flash. Then another, and there it is, the last shot. The flash instantly blinds the two girls, and their squeal of surprise causes Felina to drop the camera she was holding under the blanket. "Stupid!" shouted Jenny, who was the most cowardly in their little group. Yes. The prize for the creepiest story is definitely yours," Sylvia replied. Felina continued to stare at the camera screen where her friends were sitting. The moment of fear had been successfully captured. There will be something to post on Facebook's, Felina thought to herself. "That's it. I'm going to the bathroom and to bed," said Sylvia, and, throwing off her blanket, headed towards the bushes. "Wait, I'll come with you," Felina replied. Jenny was alone. Flames began their last dance. The girl took some twigs and threw them into the fire. Drinks, dies, eats, comes to life. She remembered such a riddle about fire that her grandfather had once riddled her. There was a loud and distinct cracking of wood behind her. Jenny turned around, but saw only impenetrable darkness. There was definitely someone in it. The girl rose abruptly from her seat, not noticing the blanket fall from her shoulders under her feet. "Girls, this isn't funny," she said. Jenny ran to find her girlfriends, but as soon as she was in the darkness, she saw a tall, skinny man in the moonlight. It was standing nearby. A tentacle reached out from behind the very back of this strange creature, dressed in a black suit, squeezed Felina's throat tightly. The girl fought the tentacle with her fingernails and let out death, like wheezes. The thin man took a step toward the dying girl, and Jenny could see that this humanoid thin creature had no face, faceless. The moon clearly illuminated his outline and white shirt with a red tie. Suddenly, the wheezing was cut short by a slight snap in the neck area. Jenny wanted to scream in terror, but all her fear became a lump in her throat. Jumping backward, the girl stepped on a branch, and the cracking sound was loud, distinct. The girl pressed herself against the tree and cried quietly, but suddenly, from outside, she heard a heartbreaking shriek. It was Sylvia. Jenny ran away as fast as she could, not noticing the slippers flying off her feet. The morning was overcast. The sky was overcast, and it looked like it was going to rain for a little while longer. Police cordoned off the woods in the afternoon as soon as the girls' parents suspected something was wrong, because none of the three girls had returned their calls. Sheriff Kevin Taylor, who was responsible for order in a small town, sent to search for all his subordinates. It's getting worse by the hour, the sheriff said to himself as he got out of his jeep. His deputy and close friend, Henry, was already giving instructions to his subordinates, running his finger over a map of the wooded area. "Hey, Henry, what do we got?" Kevin asked, glancing at the map. "3 girls are missing. Their belongings are untouched. Their blankets are lying by the burned. Out fire. It seems like they just took off like that and ran away. I'll have forensics look at the camera and its contents. Any sign of them? I can't tell you much about that either. The dogs picked up the trail, but it drops off after 20 meters. The last dog is still on the 3rd trail. Let's see where it leads." Henry finished his report. Kevin looked at the map. There were other places to explore, and he liked the field of rye. Half an hour later, Kevin gave the order to survey the field. Henry was right there. "Do you think our killer's a real pro?" asked the deputy sheriff. Kevin gave him a frown, raising an eyebrow slightly. 15 people have gone missing in these woods in 20 years. I don't think it's the work of green men. It's something more mystical and a real danger to the people of our town. "So, you're Foxmolder, huh?" Henry asked jokingly. "Go to hell. Go to hell." The search had been going on for about an hour, everyone ready for a little more, and they'd stumble upon the mangled body of a teenager where you couldn't look at the condition without tears. "Sheriff Taylor, are you there?" A gruff male voice addressed over the radio. Kevin removed the device from his belt. "Yes, I'm listening. What's your status?" "A girl, red hair, black sweater." "Jenny Williams," Henry said. "Where is she?" 3 kilometers north, by the lake." Over and out. Kevin switched the wave and ordered everyone to move north and send an ambulance there. Kevin and Henry were the first to arrive. Jenny was on her knees, writing on the shore with a stick among the rocks. "Jenny Williams?" the sheriff asked, but the girl seemed to ignore his words. Kevin and Henry approached the girl, but she still didn't notice them, still scribbling away at her. "Are you okay? Where are your friends?" Henry asked, his voice a little rougher. Kevin clearly didn't appreciate his action. "Leave her alone. She's in shock," the sheriff interceded, trying to make out the silhouettes on the rocks. The girl was taken away by ambulance. The police would continue to search around the clock. Kevin returned to the station to contact the feds, but noticed he had over 20 missed calls from his wife. "Oh, shit," the sheriff cursed. His attempts to call his wife were unsuccessful, but she must have packed up and left as promised. Being a sheriff, and a married one at that, meant that you had to be constantly torn between family and work, and sometimes the latter came first. Henry promised to keep him updated, and told Kevin to take care of his own family problems. The sheriff arrived home a half hour later. He was greeted by Cheyenne, the Labrador that his co-workers had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. "Hey, buddy. Kate's gone after all, hasn't she?" Kevin asked, getting down on one knee. Wagging his tail, the dog came up to his master and nuzzled his face into his palm, letting out a pitiful groan. After feeding the dog, Kevin showered, ate what was left over from last night, and sat down at his laptop. The news was all about the missing 2 girls. Every news feed was spinning with pictures of the girls. Locals were commenting on what was going on, sharing the news. Some even put forward their own theories. But all of them, in Kevin's opinion, were unfounded or seemed to be complete nonsense. The morning was anxious, quiet, and lonely. After a hearty bachelor's breakfast, the sheriff picked up the phone and dialed Henry's number. A beep, another, and finally a gruff male voice answers. "Hey, Kevin. Hey, Kevin. What's the news?" Nothing. We've combed almost the entire forest. Over 300 people involved. 3 choppers haven't found anything either, and even the bloodhounds are useless," Henry reported. Kevin started rubbing his eyes. For the first time, he felt helpless. "All hope is on Jenny Williams," the sheriff said. "I'm afraid not. The girl can't talk at all. She's being transferred to a mental institution. She must be out of her mind." Kevin hung up the phone, and his deputy would understand such a habit. Too nervous situation, and the chief sheriff would have to answer for everything. The guy changed into his sheriff's uniform. He took Cheyenne with him, and they drove to the hospital where Jenny had been moved earlier that morning. The hospital had a good reputation, and the doctors there were professionals. The head doctor, who examined each patient, knew Kevin from the time he had personally brought a court-ordered murderer there. Animal songs were playing on the radio. The sheriff thought only of Kate, who couldn't share her common law husband and his job. An hour later, Kevin reached the treatment center. Green lawns, cozy benches, and neat paths. Noticing a gray-haired old man in a white medical coat and papers in his hands, a uniformed man rushed toward him. "Oh, Kevin, haven't seen you in a while." Doc held out his hand. The sheriff shook it. "Hello, Mr. Brown. I'm here about Jenny Williams." Kevin got right to the point. "It's a very strange case," the doctor replied hurriedly. "I think you'd better see for yourself." Mr. Brown and Kevin walked into the hospital building. Inside, there was a peculiar hospital spirit, which psychologically suppresses a person from childhood. Walking through the maze of corridors, Doc stopped at a door labeled OP. "OP?" Kevin asked. "Special personality. Such personalities require special attention and treatment," the doctor explained. Mr. Brown took an electronic key out of his pocket and applied it to the security panel. The red light changed to green, emitting a short beeping sound. Kevin turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was all scribbled in black marker. "Jesus," was all the sheriff could get out. Jenny kept scribbling on the wall. She was drawing a forest. Almost all the walls were scribbled with trees. In the midst of this, Doc pointed to a tent near which empty chairs stood and a fire was burning. Now Mr. Brown turned the sheriff's attention to a thin, very lean and long man whose tentacles held suspended 2 bodies. The creature's face was not drawn, but his suit, shirt and tie were clearly visible. Kevin approached the girl. "Jenny, What happened that night? The girl kept stubbornly marking out the tree with a marker that had already stopped writing. The sheriff snatches the marker out of her hands. "Jenny, you gotta help me. Tell me what happened that night." The girl turns around and looks at the doctor, incredulously. Kevin clearly signaled with his facial expression for him to leave them alone. Doc nodded and left the room. And the man with the tentacles strangled them. Jenny whispered, as quietly as if she was afraid to be heard. Is that the man in the picture? Why is there no face?" asked the sheriff. "He has no face. He is a very tall and pale man. He wears a black suit and a white shirt underneath. He doesn't have hands. I've never seen anything like this before." Kevin thought for a moment. The girl pulled a piece of paper from the pocket of her hospital gown and held it out to the detective. "What's this?" the sheriff asked. "He knew we were there. I don't know how I got it." Kevin unfolded the paper. There was a picture of a forest, a tent, and 3 girls sitting around a fire. It was drawn with charcoal or some kind of pencil. "Thanks for the tip. I think we can work it out." The sheriff lied. Leaving the room and then the treatment center, Kevin returned to the car. Cheyenne was still sitting, guarding the auto in the front passenger seat. The sheriff's cell phone lay on the front seat. There was a missed call from Henry. Grinning, Kevin fumbled for his belt, but there was no walkie-talkie on it. Must have left it at the station. Calling his deputy back immediately. "Kevin, finally," Henry answered, out of breath. What's going on?" We were about to wrap up the search, but we missed 3 people. They made contact when they found some drawings in the trees. All they found was some college kid's baseball cap and 3 vague drawings. I'm on my way," Kevin said loudly and hung up. He turned on the siren and pressed the gas pedal. It was late afternoon, and Henry handed his boss the artwork he had found. "Who's missing?" asked the sheriff. Ethan Moore is a student volunteer. Thomas Hall is a local journalist, and Morgan Adams is a drunk who needs no introduction. "What's a drunk doing here?" Kevin asked. "I guess he thought he'd get paid for his time," Henry answered. The first picture showed people walking in the woods. The second 2 girls lying flat with their arms spread, and the third Henry's police jeep parked near the woods. Get it to forensics. Maybe they'll find something from the prints or determine what the bastard's drawing with, Kevin ordered. "What do we do now?" "Call everyone off. Tell them to go back to town and stay home. Put them under curfew, increase patrols on the streets." "What about you?" Henry asked. "I have my own plan." An hour later, everyone left the forest, leaving Kevin and Cheyenne alone. "It's a long shot, but I think the creature will get out tonight," Kevin said to his dog. The dog barked confidently in response. Taking the shotgun from the trunk, the sheriff followed the path into the woods. His dog, who had once served as a K9, a place where dogs are trained to detect drugs, weapons, people, and attacks on enemies, was a trustworthy companion. In 30 minutes of searching, the sheriff hadn't found anything, but he wasn't about to give up. He couldn't figure out if the tall, thin man was wearing some kind of mask, or if he really didn't have a face. If not, how does he see, breathe, feed? There were no answers, and it was unlikely there would be any. "Kevin, we've printed out the picture Felina Wright took." Henry's voice came over the radio. The sheriff took the talkie off his belt. And what are you gonna be happy about? Some bullshit. In the picture, between the trees, there's a silhouette of a tall man, oval face. I can't make out his features. He must have been wearing a mask. Unfortunately, the picture quality isn't perfect, but we'll get on it. What have you got there? A loaded beret in my hands. Cheyenne that I can't pick up the scent. And the darkness. Kevin shared the situation a little verbally. Suddenly, the flashlight beam stopped on a tree, where a leaf was hanging and a crossed-out circle was carved above it. Do not slow down. The sheriff read the gaunt inscription on the crumpled leaf. Visiting further down the trail, he saw another note. "Kevin, are you all right?" questioned Henry. "He's here. Take the guys with you and get over here right away," Kevin ordered, and put the radio away. Tearing off the sheet, he slipped it to the dog. Cheyenne sniffed it, but didn't pick up a trace. He thought of everything, that bastard. The moon lit the forest dimly, and the hooting of an owl made the sheriff look around nervously. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a white leaf on a tree. "I know. You watching at me." It was the same handwriting, and there was also a crossed-out circle. "Kevin, we're almost there. What do you got?" Henry once again broke the silence of the night. The sheriff hadn't removed the talkie from his belt. Taking a pen and pad from his shirt pocket, he scribbled something down, then tore it out and slipped it into the dog's collar. "Go to the car and wait for Henry, then bring him to me," Kevin said, but the dog whimpered, not wanting to leave his master. "Go," the sheriff said loudly, and the dog ran down the path back to the road. Kevin was alone, holstered his pistol, and took the shotgun off his shoulder. Glancing at his watch, he waited, hearing a branch crack behind him. The sheriff pointed the shotgun in the direction of the noise and went for it. About 400 inches, about 10 meters. Away, he saw another note. "Come on out, bitch. You ain't going nowhere," the sheriff shouted menacingly into the darkness.